They say that imitation is the best form of flattery. But how far is too far? How's it going, everybody? I'm Rollshambo, the connoisseur and collector of all things sharp and shiny. And let me know in the comment section down below if you've seen some knives that have gone just a little bit too far. While you're down there, go ahead and smack up the like button. But it is, in fact, a relevant question today because we're not going to just be comparing and contrasting this Coldsteel Engage to this Demko AD20.5. We're going to put them head to head. You see, channel moderator, channel member, and all-around great guy, Top Dog, reached out to me and he said, hey, would you compare the Coldsteel Engage to the Demko AD20.5? Do you have the balls? Yes. It's not just a comparison video, everybody. Today, we're actually going to put them head to head in a versus match. This is the Showdown. I've got one question for you. Are you ready for the Showdown? We're going to be comparing the Coldsteel Engage, this is the 3-inch version, against the Demko AD20.5. And yes, this is in fact my AD20.5, but you'll notice that it does not have the custom scales and backspacer and pocket clip that I had put on here, because for the sake of this comparison, I wanted it to be as apples to apples as possible without any extra scales or add-ons skewing anything in either direction. So with that being said, this is how we're going to do it. Now, I haven't reviewed the Coldsteel Engage up until now, which means that I don't have a video to point to for specs and stuff like that. So here's how we're going to play it. I'm going to talk about the specs and the features. We'll talk about the similarities between these two knives because there are a lot, and trust me when I say it's not just the locking mechanism. And then we will get into our head-to-head comparison and we'll crown a king because it's important, guys. These knives are two knives that are extremely similar. So for those of you who are looking at both of these and wondering which one should I buy, we're going to answer that question, at least in the form of my opinion. If you have your own opinion, that's great. Make sure to put that in the comment section down below and let me know your thoughts and feelings on how this goes. First and foremost, this is the Coldsteel Engage 3-inch model. Now they come in many different variants, and this specific one is going to have the S35VN blade with G10 handle scales, a G10 backspacer, deep carry pocket clip. It's got a 3-inch blade, 7¼ inches overall, which is fantastic, and it comes in at about 3.3 ounces. Very similar specs to this knife. Speaking of this knife, I'll go ahead and bring this back out. I mentioned that I was going to talk about some similarities, and we'll go ahead and address the elephant in the room. First and foremost, the biggest similarity and the biggest sore thumb is going to be the knife lock. The Demko AD20.5 has the shark lock. This is a lock designed by Andrew Demko, who used to design knife locks for Coldsteel. This is what they call the Atlas lock. And while it is a little bit different in the way that you have to trigger it back here instead of up here, they are extremely similar. Now, I took these knives apart and cross-sectioned them to show you just how similar those knife locks are. And so I'll go ahead and pop that picture up on the screen just so you can see for yourself what these look like on the inside. Now at this point, you'll notice that the Demko AD20.5 with the shark lock has this locking mechanism that depends upon 2 stop pins and a spring. It keeps the tang of the blade lodged between the stop pins and, of course, that locking mechanism. And up here with the Engage, it's very similar. It also has 2 stop pins. It depends on a spring, and that action is going to be extremely similar. Both of these are very, very sturdy knife locks, but I'm going to go ahead and make one thing clear. No matter how my feelings about the Demko AD20.5 go, or no matter what I've said in the past, I do think that it's important to give Andrew Demko some credit here for creating phenomenal knife locks. I'm sure some of you are going to mention the Triad lock in the comments section down below. Keep in mind, this comparison is going to be for the Shark lock versus the Atlas lock. Now, aside from just the locking mechanism being extremely eerily similar, I do want to mention that this knife, the Coldsteel Engage, especially the 3-inch model specifically, seems to be a bit of a shot across the bow of the Demko AD20.5. Here's another similarity. Look at how the body is held to the chassis. We've got a lot of pins and then a few body screws. And in this case, we've got a lot of pins and only 2 body screws. They both have reversible pocket clips that can go on either side. They both use, and I don't know why, for the life of me they do this, but they both use a T10 pivot, which is great, and then T6 body screws. Why? Why? Great job on the T10 for the pivot, but why couldn't we get T8 on the body screws? That's weird, but it's very, very obvious to me. The only question we have left at this point is, which one should you buy? And if we're going to look at this in a vacuum where we say, hey, you know what, maybe I'm not going to just say, oh, Demko all the way. This is a very valid comparison. This comparison is going to go based on 5 categories. We're going to do materials, ergos, usability, the value, and then finally fit and finish. And we're going to see head to head which one is going to win. This is
the showdown.
Starting off with category number 1, materials. So for materials on the Demko AD20.5, we're looking at Grivery handle scales, Oz 10A on the blade, Grivery backspacer, stamped steel pocket clip, and it's running on bearings. On the Coldsteel Engage, it's a different story. We've got S35VN with G10 handle scales, G10 backspacer, stamped steel pocket clip, and instead of bearings, it is in fact running on washers. So in the materials category, we're going to go ahead and give it to the Coldsteel Engage for winning the materials. Next up, we have the ergos. How does it feel in the hand? Is it a solid grip? Is it comfortable? Are there any hot spots? Well, something that I do want to mention is just how close, how eerily similar this profile is, this carry profile. These have almost exactly the same handle scale thickness. On the Demko, we have this diamond pattern, which is supposed to help with some grip, and it is thin on these Grivery handle scales. The liners are inset into the scales, meaning that it doesn't add any thickness there. Now, this is something that I personally do not like. I feel as if it's not 100% comfortable. It does have a lot of great jimping here on the spine of the blade, which I do appreciate. And you do have a spot up here at the top where you can, of course, choke up, but it's not a full choke up, because if you have sausage fingers bigger than mine, or you're a little too aggressive on that choke up, you're going to be running into the edge of that blade, and that's no bueno. With that being said, you also have to contend with the Shark lock itself. So when you do go to do a saber grip and take advantage of that jimping right there, it's entirely too easy to touch that lock and start to disengage the blade. And again, that's no bueno. But if we take that out of the equation and just talk about how does it feel in the hand in a normal grip, I don't necessarily like it with these scales all that much, because it's so thin and this texture is not comfortable that it creates a bit of a hot spot in my hand. Now, depending upon your hands could be different. This is just my opinion. Personally, I'm not a fan of the ergos on this. Now, this is the Coldsteel Engage, and as I mentioned before, the thickness of these handle scales is almost identical. However, we have some nice contouring going on these handle scales right here, and the G10 is smooth and feels good. Something that I'm kind of sad about is that we do not have any jimping on the spine of the blade, but I actually do believe that that's so that you could use this to strike a ferro rod if you wanted to start a fire in the woods. You know, maybe if you're camping or doing a survival camp. I don't know what you do in your free time. However, even though this is thin and just as thin as the Demko AD20.5, the way that the handle scales were manufactured and contoured over actually lends to a very comfortable grip in the hand. Even with the lack of jimping up here, the swell of the spine of the blade does do a decent job of locking your hand in, and so that feels nice. It should be no surprise that we are going to go ahead and give ergos also to the Coldsteel Engage. Next up, we've got usability. Usability is all about the opening, the closing, the lockup, the lockout. Let's go ahead and talk about it. This is really where this knife shines. The Demko AD20.5, many people will tell you, you spend $155 for the shark lock. This is the cheapest, easiest way to get the shark lock. Shark lock, shark lock, shark lock. And I gotta say, you know what? They could have foregone the thumb studs. They could have foregone the deployment slot and just had this shark lock right here. And people would go nuts about it because this is pretty much how most people that have a shark lock are going to use it. The usability is really good. Opening and closing is a dream. With the ball bearing system, it slams out, it falls back home, and it has a bias to being shut, which is what they're calling the detent. I'm not going to call it a detent because I don't think that it is one. Call me old school. However, it's extremely fidgety. I initially called this knife basically an adult fidget spinner, and I'm not taking it back. I said it, and I'm not taking it back. This feels like an adult fidget spinner, but it does so because its opening and closing mechanism is so good, as well as that lockup. Now, on this one, I do have an ever so slight amount of blade play back and forth. Up and down, none at all. Back and forth, yep, there is some. So that is a tiny bit of a disappointment. However, this is possibly one of the strongest knife locks in the game. I haven't seen any direct weight testing or any load bearing testing, but I have seen people baton with this thing, and it holds up to a hell of a lot of abuse. Again, you have to give Andrew Demko some credit for creating literally some of the best knife locks that money can currently buy. And with that being said, it should be no surprise that it seems like Coldsteel, offered him some flattery in the form of imitation. And, maybe I'm far left field here, and Andrew Demko weighed in on the Coldsteel Engage and said, no, you guys go for it. I won't be litigious this time around. However, let's talk about this some more. The Atlas lock, of course, being the elephant in the room. I'm not trying to say that Coldsteel copied Andrew Demko, but I'm also not going to say that they didn't. This being a very similar lock, that it's engaged on the back, a very strong lock, it still has some side-to-side blade play. So it's about the same, ironically, as the Demko AD20.5. So no points there. As far as actuation is concerned, this one I'm going to say is actually not as easy or as reliable to deploy and shut as the Demko AD20.5. What I mean when I say that is that it's not as convenient because the lock is not up here. Putting your finger down here in the middle of the spine of the blade is not necessarily comfortable for that same action that you get on the AD20.5. Instead, you have to reach down here and kind of scrunch up your finger, which, you know what, I'll be honest, that part is not great. However, if you decide not to do that, you can release the lock with your thumb and it just falls down, hits your index finger right there past the blade so it doesn't cut you, and then you can go ahead and shake it home. Now, one of the reasons why you have to shake this home is it's two reasons really. And the first is that this is not running on bearings. This is running on washers. The second is that while it has a bias to close, it's not nearly as bad as the Demko AD20.5. And I say not nearly as bad because I've cut myself on this a few times. Look at this extreme bias to close. It's like an assisted closing knife. Yeah, some people really like that. I don't have really a dislike for it. It's something that I had to get used to, and I did cut myself at least 3 times with this knife after I first got it. So yeah, there's that. Now, with all that being said, other channels have done some baton testing on the Coldsteel Engage. And for example, Gideon's Tactical, shout out to Gideon's Tactical. He did a test where he batoned with a 3.5-inch Engage. And while the lock didn't necessarily fail, there was so much play in the blade that it definitely looked like it had been compromised. Needless to say, the Demko AD20.5 is actually going to win in the usability because the Engage did in fact have issues in a baton test that was done on video camera on YouTube. The Demko AD20.5 did not, and also the ease of use of that lock is superfluous. You have to give Andrew Demko some credit where it's due. His knife lock is absolutely awesome, and that is definitely why people buy this knife. Let's talk about the value. And at this point, some of you might be kind of angry, and you might be typing in the comment section right now.
Well, listen up. You're comparing, the cheap one with the one with better materials.
Well, guess what? This knife, the Oz 10 Grivery handle scaled Demko AD20.5, when I bought it, went for $150. $150, and I said it was too expensive at that point too. Not that it was a bad knife, just that it was a bad price. This guy with the S35VN G10, which by the way is more durable and holds up to better heat and cold and stress than Grivery. This model right here, this can currently be bought on Blade HQ for $135. So yeah, do they make a S35VN version with G10 handle scales? Yes, but you're going to be paying a lot more. So even if I was comparing this knife to this knife, and this one happened to have the S35VN and G10 that you can buy for about $185, $200, how could I not still give the victory to the Coldsteel Engage? The Coldsteel Engage is awesome. $135, you get S35VN, G10, and the Atlas lock. Come on. That's what I'm talking about. When people say, well, it's all the money's in the lock, guess what? It's not. It's definitely not. And if you're wondering about where these guys were manufactured, they were both manufactured in Taiwan. And while I cannot prove it, I have a suspicion that they're actually manufactured by the same OEM in Taiwan, because Andrew Demko, having worked a lot of time with Coldsteel, probably has the same OEM connections that Coldsteel currently does. So there you have it, guys. The value, without a shadow of a doubt, goes to the Coldsteel Engage 3-inch. Finally, let's talk about fit and finish. Initially, when I got the Demko AD20.5, this was the very first run that they did. And it was one case study, one sample. But when I got this, I can tell you that the edge bevel was not good. You see that edge bevel on there now? It looks great, doesn't it? That's because I was so annoyed with the quality of the cutting edge on this knife when it was brand new. I went ahead and put my own edge on there because I could not stand it. As far as everything else it seems to be put together rather well. I do kind of have some wishes that they had captivated these screws a little bit better. Sometimes when you go to unscrew one, it unscrews the other, and that's a little bit annoying. Another thing I want to talk about is just how hideous and how much I dislike the stock pocket clip on the Demko AD20.5. This is one of the things that I changed when I started modifying this knife. I put it back the way it was stock for you guys so that I could do an apples to apples comparison. But I'm here to tell you that I really dislike this pocket clip. It's ugly. It's not deep carry. It's not particularly good in ergonomics either. Like I'm not going to say that the pocket clip is a hot spot, but I notice it. And when I hold a knife, I don't want to be thinking about the pocket clip while I do that. On the Coldsteel, this one is a different story, where the Demko AD20.5 feels like a template for a better knife. The Coldsteel Engage feels like a finished product. Now, it goes without saying that, yes, you can buy new scales for the AD20.5. You can get a new backspacer. You can get a new pocket clip. You can get a reblade. You can replace everything about this knife and keep the shark lock if that's what you want to do. On this knife, it doesn't necessarily have that. You can't just go out and buy more scales, but that's okay because the G10 handle scales that are on here feel good as is. The pocket clip is not something that I hate. Yes, it's a stamped steel clip, but it's the ski jump variety. I will ding it just a little bit for having dome screws right there instead of flathead screws, but honestly, that's an easy fix that I could fix myself. I could go out and get some flathead screws and fix that. It's not a big deal. I really like this knife, and honestly, the fit and finish on here is what I expect from a Taiwanese OEM. On this knife, it's all about the shark lock, and that's it. It's like they said, you know what? Let's do a good job on the shark lock, and then let people buy their own scales and their own pocket clip. And yeah, don't worry about the fact that the ergos are a little bit sketchy because shark lock, wazah, 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 wazah. It's a fidget spinner for men or women. I don't know. This feels like a work knife. And here's what I mean when I say that. The ergos are designed to be comfortable with a lot of pressure being put on them. Even though these handle scales are thin, it doesn't feel insubstantial. Because they're thin and because this knife is light, you can actually wear this with your gym shorts. You know how I know? I took this to the gym with me and I did not feel it in my pocket the entire time. Got home and realized that I was carrying the Coldsteel Engage the entire time. But that just goes to show this knife was very well made for EDC and for some harder use EDC tasks. Normally I'm over here talking about how you shouldn't be feather sticking with your knife. I believe that that's not going to be an issue on here. I really enjoy this knife. I think that for the money, it could potentially be one of the best knives to buy in this price range, in the sub $150 price range. And I mean that. One thing that makes me sad is that Andrew Demko made one hell of a knife lock, and Coldsteel said, you know what? We see what you did there, and we think that we can do better. Many of you might think that I hate the AD20.5, but the truth is that I really like this knife after I make my modifications to it. And as soon as this video is over, that's the very first thing I'm going to do is put on some new scales. I'm going to put on my pocket clip. I'm going to put on my titanium backspacer. And I'm probably never going to put the Grivery handle scales on here ever again. I'm definitely not going to put the pocket clip on here ever again because let's be honest, guys. Until you do those things, this knife just really isn't that great. As it stands, I don't believe that the Oz 10 version of this knife or even the D2 version of this knife should top $100. I think that this knife with this materials should cost somewhere around the $80 to $100 price point, and good luck trying to convince me otherwise. In the meantime, if you want a knife with good materials, solid build quality from Taiwan, and a company that we've all grown to know and love, this could be it. If you want something that disappears in your pocket but is there for a good time and not just to be used as a fidget tool, I would 100% recommend this knife. The Coldsteel Engage 3-inch is a banger at $135. It is currently available, and if you're interested, I will link it in the description and in the pinned comment. Let me know what your thoughts are down below. Was I unfair to the Demko AD20.5? Did I call it as it is? Or would you 100% agree with me that the 3-inch Engage is the way to go in the $150 and under price range? The clear winner today is the Coldsteel Engage, and if you want to see more thoughts on the Demko AD20.5, make sure you watch the video that pops up next.